it started after he found that when a guy named Constantine Simonides, who was a dealer and a maker of manuscripts, he was also charged, accused of forgery. Gail Riplinger mentions this in one of her early talks. She says that there's a possibility that he forged the manuscript, but you can't really trust a forger and you can't really trust a fraud. So we don't, she basically leaves it with that. So if Simonides created this as a draft, this is something that was completely missed in between. Sinaiticus was a draft, not the final copy that was going to be going to the czar in return for a printing press for the monastery. And wouldn't it be interesting and poetic if they made such a sloppy manuscript saying, this is a gift for the czar, and we really need a printing press that would help us not, for things not to be handwritten and careless like this. And this illustrates how our Byzantine text is, superior to the Alexandrian because we have the Alexandrian as a representation of the sloppiness of careless scribes that can occur. So here's the poetic, this poetic gift for the Tsar of Russia. And also then the unique readings would also be a representation of this same sloppiness. So anyways, this, for those of you that have not listened to the Chris Pinto James White debate yet, I highly recommend that you do. The link will be in the description of this video, along with some book links. And thank you, Titus. And I just came up with that on the top of my head. I was like, oh, that actually kind of makes a little bit of sense. Why would they give such a piece of garbage to their czar? That is one way that it could make sense. So that would be a motivation for Simonides to have actually created Sinaiticus, which I don't think I've never actually heard that before. I don't believe. So anyhow, I would like to show you guys the clip from Tears Among the Wheat. I misnamed this live stream. I will fix it later if I remember. I misnamed it Reviewing Bridge to Babylon. We are not doing that. We are reviewing Tares Among the Wheat, part of that, called Simonides Affair. So if you guys go cardcarryingchristians.com/untold Bible story, Chris Pinto's documentaries will be there in a very, very low quality. If you guys want to get something that's like actually halfway decent to see, you can see the references in high definition. You can copy down book names, stuff like that. I would highly recommend that you guys check out the DVDs and order those. Those will be, I think I have Bridge to Babylon linked in the description. So forget that. You guys can go to cardcarryingchristians.com/untold Bible story, and we'll have the links there for where you can purchase those DVDs. I'm not sure if it's just going to be through Amazon. I don't remember what I have there on the website, and I don't really want to go there now for fear it'll throw off StreamYard. So I went through the debate between James White and Chris Pinto a few days ago and wrote down everything I could. And it's quite a lot of notes. I tried to write down everything so it would be a good representation of what they actually said, the best that I could. Anyways, it's probably 10 pages long, I would say, of handwritten, medium lined paper. So for those of you that have seen Tares Among the Wheat, you're also still going to be interested in watching the video. First one, because I'm also going to be making commentary, which harkens back to the debate between Chris Pinto and James White, and James White, his response to Chris Pinto's written response to the post-debate comments that James White got. And also, I believe Chris Pinto responded to at least the post-debate thing that James White said about him needing to repent for his accusations against Constantine von Tischendorf, because he was a good, solid Christian, just like James White somehow. So, and also the other reason is because SatanCon is going on in Boston, not many hours drive from here. And if we have time, I would like to give you guys some things that you guys should watch out for in your lives to see someone that has been a victim or, could really still be a SRA, which is ritual abuse. So that I thought would be something important to bring in. And yes, it was very interesting. And it really broke down to, here's quick synopsis. Chris Pinto's main point is it's still a possibility. And he agrees with what's his name? Farrar, I think was his last name. That Simonides, which is how James White pronounces it. I guess it's the modern Greek pronunciation, sort of the modern Greek American pronunciation. I'm sure Greeks would have something to say about Simonides too. But anyways, his basic idea was the same as Farrar. He said that the debate was settled too quickly. Constantine Simonides was written off as a forger too quickly, and everybody just ganged up on him and was just like, and basically he couldn't get a word in edgewise that anybody would listen to at all. So he just basically, said his final words and left England, said that everything that he said was true, and went back to Greece, I believe, or Turkey. So I can't remember where he went back to. I doubt that he went to St. Catherine's. I don't remember. Anyways, his basic idea was that the debate was over too quickly. Question was, no, the age of Sinaiticus is a settled matter. It is an authentic 4th century manuscript. It is an ancient unsealed codice, which is a big book form written in block capital Greek letters with no spaces, which I'm sure is horrendous to read. But when, vellum's expensive, it makes a little bit of sense. So let me see. Chris Pinto's main arguments were from the history of the controversy between Simonides and Simonides and Tischendorf. That's where Chris Pinto draws most of his information. James White, on the other hand, draws most of his opposition to what Chris Pinto is saying about the possibility, which he tries to entertain it as a possibility. The documentary, I think, can seem maybe a little bit more strongly what's the word? Convict a strong indictment, stronger indictment. Seems to be. Yeah, the minuscules probably did save space with the not all being caps. I don't know why they did all big block capital letters. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. Probably the same reason why the Hebrews would have left off like vowels at some point in history. Laziness. I don't know. Maybe just to do something different. I don't know. I think there's a couple of good reasons, but I don't remember them. Anyways. James White, on the other hand, draws most of his stuff. He quotes two people that say that in very brief sentence long quotations that Simonides, which is how it is pronounced in the film, was not trustworthy. And then, you know, that was about it as far as history goes. And those names are from yeah, um, paleographical. The word guy. There goes again. Okay. Paleographical, I think is the word I'm looking for. What's the link again on Card Carrying Christians? cardcarryingchristians.com/untold Bible story. As one word. No spaces. No dashes. So basically, the debate ends with Dwight saying, nope, there were multiple different people that wrote the text of this manuscripts, plus other people that wrote the text of the corrections. And doesn't Simonides that wrote this text. Okay, so that doesn't make sense if Simonides was the only person that wrote this text. And there are unique readings that are found in Sinaiticus that are only found in a couple of other places. Come on. I hope the video is not. All right. So, and also new that are only Atticus and the papyri. It only makes, if things were more genuine space, like really completely unique readings that are only found in the papyri and then an unsealed manuscript, those get a lot of credence that way, because especially since they're unique, they could have gotten, completely, pretty much wiped out and then carried on incorrectly for the rest of it. That's a very strong possibility. So my only thought with that, if I really want to go way out on the conspiratorial limb, is that a lot of the papyri could also have been planted after Sinaiticus. That is one thought. And also, those unique readings may have come from outside some other way other than Greek manuscripts. They could have come from either learned memory or other translations, not Greek. Different things like that. Thoughts, anyways. For what they're worth, from a non expert that is just a little bit passionate about the topic. See if I can get. Boom. Okay. So there's little me. The Simonides affair. This is starting at 1 hour, 31 minutes, and 17 seconds.
$6.
Okay. So, and yes, they do kind of portray Tischendorf as a buffoon, like James White says. So I'm probably going to leave the video for my camera off so that it doesn't have to process all that information and just leave it on audio. If anybody has any issues with seeing it or what have you, please let me know. And I really hate the format. It's almost a square for the video. Anyways, doesn't allow a lot of space. I hope I this is just a thing for me. I really hope that Chris, which is short for Christian, not Christopher. I really hope that his filmmaking skills have leveled up in 2023. I haven't seen any recent films from him, so I do not know. I also don't know what his situation is, what's going on in his life, if he's still just prepping documentaries that he's making, which is just what I've kind of always assumed about where he's at. If anybody knows, or Chris, if you watch this video, you guys can drop a comment on the video below, or you can send me an email at bibleversionconspiracy@gmail.com. So yes, Tischendorf received with laudation.
Across Europe. Constantine Simonides is undoubtedly the link in the Codex because he waged an open and a public debate against Theodore for about 4 years, arguing that Codex Sinaiticus was not an ancient at that time. Alan Humboldt's was an his understanding ancient language to be in.
Okay, so is the audio and video cooperating? Is anybody having issues? I see it's blinking out a lot in StreamYard, and it looks kind of, like it's not flowing very well. Is there a better way that you guys think I could be doing this? I don't jack right, so I don't think I can play it through my my DVD adapter. I just need to see some let's see. Your upload speed may be too slow to run the inserted video through the stream. It might be. I could hardly hear it. Okay. But it is on the screen. That's one battle won in this war. Oh, I don't know if the way that I can present this in audio only. I am thinking. Didn't say this was going to be perfect. Let me try something quick. Really. So I wish I was little bit better prepared for this, guys. This hobby can't always come first. Someday, hopefully, this will be our full. It'll be a good form for us once. It's kind of ridiculous how they present their software right off the bat. StreamYard is much more clean, easier to use, but it is a paid subscription. And as it is right now, I don't have to throw at it. Let me see. Trying to think of any other way that I could be doing this. Hang on. Okay. I might have it on one of my old jump drives. Possibly. Can you guys still hear me? That's a good question. Because I had downloaded this whole thing at one point, and I don't think with the stream going on that it's going to keep doing that. Let me see. I might not be able to come back on with video because I'm going to have to plug in my drive to that same USB port. And I do really... Let me see. Looks like your camera was unplugged. Plug it back in or select a different camera. Click the camera button to turn it back on when you're ready. Thank you, StreamYard. I've always wondered about apocryphal readings of thoughts inserted into that text. Yep. Commentary and things can, I'm sure, lead to unique readings as well. Okay. All right. Documentaries. Pinto documentaries. Not there. Let me try searching it this way. Tears. I'm sorry, guys. You guys are so patient. I appreciate you three so much. You guys are saints. You guys are ridiculously patient. I really thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You guys, I can't believe that there are people out there that that want to be here this badly to you guys, like I've said before, you guys deserve all the gold stars, all of them. Let's see. Thank you, Spray Arm. Scanning and repairing the second drive where it might be. By the way, guys, in case you guys wonder who Spray Arm is, his name is Charles. We've been friends for years through Facebook only. I've talked to him on the phone once, I think. Yeah, it's it's been a lot of fun knowing him. He's got a really interesting sense of humor to me. Let's see. Scanning and repairing still. Come on. Yeah, once or twice on the phone. Yeah, we go back a ways. I don't even remember when we actually became friends. Have we actually become friends? I don't know. Charles Evans. Information. So, let's see. Maybe if I see your profile, maybe it will say. Salvation by faith alone in Jesus Christ. Conspiracy terror. No, not terrorist. Conspiracy theorist. My pronouns are told you so. That's hilarious. The Juxter. 33 mutual friends. Dun dun dun. It doesn't tell me how long we've been friends. What on earth? See friendship. Here we go. Drive was successfully repaired. Let's see. Videos. Chris Pinto. Lamp in the Dark, Sinaiticus. A Forgery, Chris Pinto versus James White. Tares Among the Wheat, Chris Pinto. AVI file. And we're going to open that in VLC Media Player. Because the file index is broken or missing, seeking will not work correctly. Fixing AVI file, 2%, 3%, 4%. Ay, ay, ay. All right, there we go. Well, will allow me to seek. It doesn't want me to seek. Let's try this again. September 22nd, 2019. Posts. I don't know. 131, I said, right? For the seeking. There we go. Okay. Super low quality download, too. Oh, well. Hey, look at that. We got two of our people back. I've had this Facebook account since about 2008 or 2009. Can't believe Joseph has put up with me this long. It's been a pleasure, Charles. It's been a pleasure. Let's see. Do 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 do. I think if I do this, pre-sent, share screen. Or maybe, can I share a video file on here? That would just be totally crazy. You know what? Let's try it. Let's see if it will let me share a video file. That would be phenomenal. Nope, it doesn't want me to share that file. Crud. Let's see if we can share the screen then. Share screen. Boy, I was wondering at the beginning of, well, not the beginning of this broadcast, but earlier today, I was like, am I obsessed enough with this topic to make it what I do with my life? And I'm surprising myself more and more that this topic could actually consume my entire life, which is nothing, but the Word of God is everything. And I think that this topic needs to be explored, and there is a lot of conspiracy theory that is completely unnecessary, and a lot of it that is absolutely essential. I guess those are the two different types of conspiracy theories: the ones that are true and absolutely essential, and the ones that are false, which are important to know and can also be dangerous. Let's see then. Windows, tares among the wheat, share. Alrighty then. Alright, that doesn't look like it'll totally screw things up. Now see, split screen is making that squarey shaped window, which is a pain in the tush. But it is what it is. I think maybe I can do that. It would be so much better to have two screens, but a dongle won't do it. It's a $200, what is it? Docking station. Absolutely crazy stuff. And you guys can tell this is one thing which I'm going to use that makes this whole thing, I think, maybe a little bit more legit, because especially with my first logo, you could assume anything that you wanted to about, you know, Illuminati connections or something like this. If I was connected to the Illuminati, I would have a better budget for streaming equipment. As it is, I go to work, I come home, I scrape together pennies, I get cheap microphones, cheap tablet laptops, cheap dongles, cheap cameras, unless I've been scraping money together for a long time. So, the Jesuits are not letting me borrow their money. The Illuminati's not letting me borrow their money. The Bilderbergers are also not allowing me to borrow their money. It's very, very rude of them. Every time I ask, they turn me down. Okay. The Simonides affair. StreamYard is sharing a window. Hide. Okay. Sounds good to me. All right, you guys will have to let me know if you can hear this. I'm going to turn it way, way up into the red. Can you guys hear the dramatic music? Yes, no. And also, don't forget, if you are enjoying this video so far, if you've gotten anything out of it, please hit that like button. And if you so choose, share the video if you think somebody else might enjoy it. A lot of this nonsense can just hear you. That hurts. If I put it on speaker, we're going to have feedback. Let me try playing that audio again one more time. All right, did anybody hear that from the video? Greeted with laudation, Chris Pinto's narration, Constantine, von Tischendorf's laudation. Any of the Asians? No. This is ridiculous. Pretty soon, you know what it's going to come down to? We've been going for an hour, and this is insane. Okay. I think most of the suspense is, will I figure out how to make this work? If I put it on speaker, I'm not getting audio from the video. I'm not getting audio from the live stream, so it shouldn't make a loop. We don't mind being your beta testers. You guys are alpha testers. Don't put your guys self, I don't know. If this is a rank thing, you guys are definitely the A team. I appreciate you guys so much. Hey, anybody that is watching this video and able to comment, you're able to comment if you're a subscriber. Drop a comment in the live chat. Let me know you're listening. I would love to know who the 4 other saintly patients of Job people are that are hanging out with us here tonight at 12:12 in the morning. And I will hopefully be able to trim all the rough spots out of this after the fact. Let's see. I'm going to try... What am I going to do? I don't blame you, Titus. What time zone are you in, by the way? Is it 12:12 there? 2? I don't blame you for napping. I'd love to do that myself. Okay. If you just yawned. Trying to find any excuse for you guys to leave a comment in the live chat. Let's see now. 11:12 p.m. here. Okay, that's good to know. I'm in East Tennessee. Okay, so I think the same time zone as Spray Arm, if I'm not mistaken. You two are troopers. I absolutely... I can't express my gratitude for you guys being on the other end of this. Let's see now if I... Let's see if we get a huge feedback loop. I don't think we will. Central Time, okay. Mississippi. I'm going to turn off my earbuds. Take it out of my ear. And I'm going to... For some reason, the speaker is in the Samsung Q2U. Let's see. Yep, you guys can still hear me. I'm trying to test the audio. Testing. I think we started chatting when you had buckets of goats in the kitchen. Yep, that was a long time ago. And I was on YouTube at that point too, I believe. That wasn't this channel, that was another channel. Wait, that doesn't seem that long ago, but it really was. Time is a crazy thing that we're all living in. Oh dear. Well, we found the audio, or we found the video clip, and we're sharing the window. Let's see, now that I turned it to the regular high definition speakers, let me try turning this down. Let me know if you guys hear this. Nope, no sound. 3/13/27, you had a tub of 2 new baby goats in the kitchen. No sound. Thank you very much, you two. I don't know if the other 3 people just don't have the ability to comment, or if there's not actually 3 more people. Maybe they're just robots. I don't know. So, let me do... Do you guys hear that tone? Right there? I'll hang out for a second while you guys reply. Bong. Alright. This should work then. Let me do something crazy and jack up this audio that we're going to use here tonight. We're going to get this done. We are going to do this. We are going to push through. I don't care if it's 15 o'clock in the morning by the time we're done. We're going to do this thing. Alrighty then. And I don't want to run out of power, so I'm going to run myself a little cord for this speaker I have here. We're going to connect it to Bluetooth, and then we're going to blast it into this microphone coming to you at light speed through the airwaves of 5G, which are frying all of our brains and molecules and nervous systems and everything else. Which, by the way, if you guys want to get any tech, this is not a sponsored ad. If you guys want to get any tech, maybe it's a little expensive, but it'll last you forever. It will last past you. Go to theemffix.com. That's theemffix.com. And that's where you can get some stainless steel plates, which have been specially treated with nanotechnology, with lasers, and will actually correct the 5G signals being beamed into your home, which are hurting your health, which are hurting your attitude, which are hurting your gut flora, and every other aspect of your life in indistinguishable ways. But when those ways are gone, you will notice the difference. I highly recommend that you check out that website, the EMF Fix. That's electromagnetic field, the EMFfix.com. Probably nobody's going to see that outside of this live stream. Just thought I'd mention it. Righto. Let's connect this thing. Let's go to settings. Go to devices. Go to Bluetooth. Does anybody have any questions? Any questions at all regarding this topic or others that I may or may not be able to address in the next few moments here while we're together? For me. It's from Patch the Pirate. Turn on. Now it's turning off. All right, I quit. All right, it should be discoverable now. Looking for F4. Come on, F4, where are you? This needs to remove device. Yes. Samsung Q2 microphone is already plugged in. DeWalt earphones. Those are still paired. And they are off. So I'm going to leave that off for now. Let me see if this works. Bluetooth. F4 audio. There we go. All right. And now everybody's gone now that we finally have success. Did Constantine's mother name that monastery? That is what I think I've heard. Ken Hovind described the person who named the monastery, I believe, as, quote, an Egyptian princess, end quote. So I don't know a lot about that. Constantine's mother probably did name it that. It would make a lot of sense. Saint Catherine. I doubt that she named it Saint Catherine's, but it's a possibility. I think that what Constantine's mother or the Egyptian princess that Ken Hovind mentions actually called that Mount Sinai, not actually naming the monastery. I don't know. Anybody has any information about that, that would be amazing. Device is ready. Sinaiticus. What is the main gist of Sinaiticus being a forgery? The main gist of it being a forgery is not that it was a forgery. The forgery aspect of it is where the many pages of it, which were found at different times in Constantine's travels back and forth to St. Catherine's, even a fraction of it was being used as a bookmark in, I believe, his middle trip. And many of these pages are still very white today, and many of the pages from his initial discovery, I believe it is, are much more yellowed and ancient looking. The accusation is that Tischendorf would have treated them, or such like that, with rusty nails, lemon juice, things like this, and made them look older than they really were. You guys can check out more information on the colors of the pages in and on the front cover of David W. Daniels' book called Is the World's Oldest Bible a Forgery or a Fake? I believe he uses the word fake. Link to that in the description if you guys want to check that out. Oldest and best, some scholar guy. Yeah. That's what they all say. Oldest and bestest. I like that. I'll see you, me, and Spray Armor just a little bit twisted. That's why we're here tonight. That's why we're up so late. These crazy hours are occupied by these people who are just a little bit on the interesting side. 15 o'clock ish. Let me see. Hang on a second. The night is just getting started. Spray arm. Ta-da. This is cool. I like being able to do that. The oldest is best. Some scholar guy. Yeah. I like StreamYard. It's cool so far. I like how it's cleanly laid out. Streamlabs is completely the opposite. It was way too overwhelming for a beginner, and I don't know if I'm going to go back. I like StreamYard. Maybe there's a way that I can scrounge up $5 a week. We will have to see. Oh, do. Can everybody hear that? The night is just getting started. You know what? Maybe this will stay a late night live stream. I hear music. Yay. This is phenomenal. Now, see, it does nothing, absolutely nothing tonight is working like it's supposed to. My video's not working. The video I'm trying to play is not working. The sizing is wrong for the window. I have a Bluetooth speaker pumping music in through a dynamic microphone, which is not what you're supposed to do. And all of this, you nothing is working tonight like it's supposed to, but we're working around it. That is one skill that I am glad I spent 5 years at Ace Hardware before moving on to my, I guess, dream job, more or less. Yeah. Glad I spent 5 years at Ace because you learn how things can go wrong. And when you don't have the right tool, you learn how you can work around it. You have a problem, God has given us the ability and he gives us the aid when we have to work through something, work around something. And before we get into this, let's pray. Dear God, thank you for tonight, and thank you for this live stream and just how things are kind of plugging along, and we're covering a lot more information tonight, and I don't know how many people are going to see this, but Please help this to keep moving. Help for us to figure this out better, please. If it's your will for us to do this, you know, please help us. Please help the pieces to start coming together. Please help tonight. I don't know where everyone is, Lord, but you do. I don't know what's going on at Satan Con, but you do. I don't know what's going on in the House of Victor. I don't even know if the House of Victor exists. You do. And whatever's going on in Boston, whatever's going on in Victor's house, if he's even still alive, I don't know what's going on, Lord, but please be there. Save the people from these horrific things that are being done by people who call themselves Satanists, even though everyone who calls himself a Satanist may not be doing it. Please save the oppressed from the underground world that is under everywhere that we wouldn't think it would be. Please, Lord, frustrate the forces of darkness tonight through what we're doing and through what others are doing. Please hear the prayers of your prayer warriors that are up tonight, burdened, listening. Praying. Please, Lord, move the mountains. Expose the wickedness. Level the kingdom of darkness. Please, in Jesus' name. Amen. Alrighty. Not sure what the purpose is this evening, but it's working. Oh my, does any of us know what the true purpose is? All right. I'm going to be pausing it more than enough tonight. Let's get going.
After Tischendorf revealed his Codex Sinaiticus, he was hailed as a great scholar and greeted with laudation across Europe. But shortly after the work was published, it was challenged by a prominent expert in paleography. His name was Constantine Simonides.
Okay. Simonides, or however James White pronounces it, however it's pronounced in Greek, I do not know. If I was to ask an English speaker how it's pronounced, I would ask a Greek who speaks English, or I would ask Stephen Anderson. He's pretty good in Koine Greek, and modern Greek. Simonides was, to my understanding, a very talented, very scholarly. I believe he was from Turkey, if I'm not mistaken. Greek Orthodox, and he had a very astonishing collection of Old Testament and New Testament stuff and things that were also not biblical documents. Different things like that. And so, yeah, I'll let the video do the rest on Simonides. Not sure how well recognized he was back then, but
Simonides is undoubtedly the forgotten link in the history of Codex Sinaiticus, and it's because he waged an open and a public debate against.
Which, by the way, I love the actor that they picked for this. I think he did a phenomenal job. Tischendorf I mean, even the name just sounds more stuffy and more, Simonides, the way that he's portrayed as, a revolutionary and a scholar and just kind of a you know, oh, not a wild card, but more like a a protege, I guess. Just, I don't know that he always told the truth on everything. Farrar nailed a couple of things that he didn't think he said that were true. He also said that that what was it? Something about the essential character of truth or something like this was the essential element of truth was not a part of his it was not an essential part of his character or something like this. But the interesting thing is that if Simonides was lying about the entire affair, about his uncle and the other two monks that he names, and if he wrote the letters from oh, what's that guy's name? I had his name on the tip of my brain. I haven't even heard it in years. The one Greek that wrote letters from Greece, if he forged those, I don't see motivation for it. I do not see motivation for why he would come forward and say, "Oh, nope, I wrote that manuscript," just because maybe he was vindictive against Tischendorf exposing his ancient Greek copy of the Shepherd of Hermas, which is also called the Shepherd, to make it shorter. That story doesn't make a lot of sense. That would drive him to concoct this elaborate thing, get his name completely trashed by the popular media of the time. It doesn't make a lick of sense to me. Not at all. So either he was lying, he was crazy, or he was telling the truth. We'll see. I do want this documentary to speak for itself as well. I don't want to do all the talking, so I'll just try to interject when I think it's necessary.
Tischendorf for about 4 years, arguing that Codex Sinaiticus was not an ancient manuscript. And the more you study Simonides, you realize that he was a very important figure at that time.
That's something that you won't get from the people that are just critics and just worship the ground that Constantine Tischendorf walked on. You won't get that. I recommend that any of us that want to get to the bottom of it do our own independent study. We'll have to see what kind of time I have to do that, but for now, we'll do what we can.
Alexander von Humboldt declared that Simonides was an enigma. Others believed his understanding of ancient languages to be ingenious. A 19th century publication said of him, Dr. Simonides is a Greek by birth, and he speaks and writes the classic language of his forefathers with fluency, purity, and elegance. From his uncle, Simonides thoroughly acquired the art of paleography.
That will be important later because paleography is crazy. You determine how old, like David Daniels has pointed out constantly, you determine how old a manuscript is by looking at it. This looks old. This doesn't look as old as this. Like one person pointed out, if you write like your mom and your mom writes like her mom, then that can move your writing back 100 years or forward 100 years. People try to be way too precise with the shapes of letters and things like that, especially when, what was it? I think Ken Hovind mentioned it at one point, somebody else did too, about how the Catholic Church would actually train their monks to write in older styles, and then they'd go out, bury them, dig them up, and be like, oh, wow, look at this. And then paleography and, oh, look, this was written in this form and stuff like this, when it was that scribe's only job was to write Greek or Latin or whatever in the form that it was used at such and such time, so it could be identified that way. No chemical testing of inks. That's one thing that I think is like the big holdout on this whole thing. David Daniels points it out constantly. Has, and why not? If not, why not? Has Sinaiticus not been subjected to chemical testing? Chemical testing will tell you so much about the ink when certain blues were invented, and if, they can't be later than when this ink was first invented, or earlier than when this ink was first invented, and just all kinds of stuff. Has unearthed forgeries wazoo. New Testament documents too, little bitty codexes that were thought to be ancient. They're not. You can look at the ink that was used underneath the ink that was there for the text or whatever else, and it's just like, okay, yeah, no, this document was made, in like, the 1800s, 1900s, something like this, and it was just made to look old. And Christian scholars, good godly Christian scholars, have been caught with their pants down, loving on these manuscripts, and then they turn out to be forgeries, and then they just try to make you forget about it. It's the scientific community. They're always updating, and they always don't want to take responsibility for their mistakes. Anyways, let's keep going.
And became so great a proficient therein, that few surpass him either in the practice of it or in the diagnosis of manuscripts. Simonides had quite a reputation in the 19th century. On the one hand, he was a respected paleographer, but on the other hand, he had kind of a cloak and dagger history and was looked upon as sort of a Greek Indiana Jones.
Okay. So the file hates me. It absolutely hates me. Yes, the swashbuckling, I'm not sure.
The two scholars in question were Samuel P. Europe. So he was in. Yep.
Okay. So, yes. And I'm not sure, because I don't know enough about Simonides to really be able to say a lot about him. Chris Pinto has done a lot more research into him than I have. David Daniels has just completely wonked out on the whole thing. He has written 2 books about this discussion, and dug up things that I didn't even know would be even available today, about Simonides, Tischendorf, the monastery, just all sorts of things. It's pretty fantastic. So I can only assume that since it was not contradicted by James White, that many people did esteem Simonides as a modern Indiana Jones. A lot of people also considered him to be a forger, but the thing is that he was never actually convicted of forgery. He was tried as a forger once that I'm aware of, and he was he was acquitted. They did not find him guilty of the forgery that he was being accused of making. He had a lot of very interesting and phenomenal Greek texts. Matthew, he had a manuscript of Matthew that was completely unique and was written within like, what was it? Like 15 years apparently, according to, paleography standards. I'm not sure if that's exactly how it was dated, but it was supposed to have been written within 15 years of Matthew's death. And he also had a first century copy of the 1 John 5:7. Apparently, I would have loved to have seen that. James White also said that he would love to see that I guess there is a rumor of it being in some place or other. I do not know where that is, but that would be fascinating to see examined, and also to see it chemically tested. Just because I believe that 1 John 5:7 is a valid verse does not mean that the document that is supposed to bring it from the 1st century to this does not need to be chemically tested. Everything needs to be verified as best as possible. So that's called doing things honestly. And that this is the whole purpose of this channel, is because things that are garbage, that are just like, nope, sorry, this doesn't work. Nope, sorry, this is inconsistent with history. Nope, sorry, this is inconsistent with scientific chemical testing. Things like that need to be, oh, my bad, get rid of it. You know, we can't just hold on to things just because we're like, oh no, it's a Jesuit conspiracy, and this is, this is a setup and stuff like this. We can't say that about everything. We can hold it as an option, but until then, it's hard to assert something with certainty that is doubtful. We can only leave it up to the reader or the viewer of the information to decide for themselves if they think that it is possible or it is legit or whatever else. Okay, here goes. Oh, not again. Okay, so it hates that part with Simonides being compared to Indiana Jones. It absolutely hates it. Let's see what happens.
Therein, that few surpass him either in the practice of it or in the diagnosis of manuscripts. Simonides had quite a reputation in the 19th century. On the one hand, he was a respected paleographer, but on the other hand, he had kind of a cloak and dagger history and was looked upon as sort of a Greek Indiana Jones.
No! So painful. Come on.
For nearly
All right, we're going to try this a different way. Sorry. Last time that I opened it, it cleared up some things. All right, we're going to try this again.
lands of the West Church. He had presented his work before.
Okay, we gained a little bit of ground here. Let's bring that screen back in. Share screen. Window. Tares among the wheat. Share. Alrighty. It's gone forward just a little bit. But I think this might work.
Kings, nobles, foreign ministers, diplomats. He'd sold a number of manuscripts to the British Museum and other prominent institutions in Europe before. And as
Okay, so it doesn't like anything back before that.
Controvert Ingle.
Yeah, we're not going to do that.
Under battles with these, Charles Cuddies extend over nearly 20 years. I could no speleography, pure figures at that time. Their cemetery. Down over what can only be called the most controversial book into the authorship.
This is what happens when you try to feed an old video file off of an old jump drive. And you suffer for it. Especially when you try to stream it through modern software. 133.14. Please, 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 please pick back up. Come on. No. Guys, like I said, nothing is working tonight like it's supposed to.
Simonides had quite a reputation. He had presented his work before kings, nobles, foreign ministers.
Okay, this is about as good as we're going to get it. But in Latin, Joe begins with an I. You and your Indiana Jones references. Don't call me Junior. Oh, spray arm. I love your sense of humor.
So he was involved in the highest levels of the academic world at that time.
Simonides owned a collection of more than 5,000 ancient manuscripts that he had partly inherited from his uncle.
Now, in the debate, to what I remember, it was 2,000 that he brought with him to London. 2,000 manuscripts that he brought with him. Not that he had in his possession. He said 5,000 in the documentary here, but those could have been, left back at his apartment in St. Catherine's. Who knows?
He traveled across Europe. He presented these works at libraries and universities. Their content often sparked intense debate. Simonides' debates usually centered around the understanding of ancient languages, and he generally believed that his own knowledge was superior to those around him. Although,
now that is not, a huge stretch, especially when he was raised in this stuff. He apparently he claimed to have made a Sinaiticus when he was 19, so he was, he lived and breathed this stuff. Living, I think he arrived in St. Catherine's around the same time. His uncle, who was there, was a monk, and he was joining him there for the project and such. So it is very likely that all these different things that he claims are actually true, that he had access to these crazy documents. I know it might sound crazy, but there is apparently over 100 manuscripts. I don't know if they're still there at St. Catherine's that are uncatalogued that nobody really knows anything about. And in that area, there's at least 900 more. And that's something that's that possibility, whether or not Simonides was actually making that up. I don't think that it's a stretch of the imagination that he didn't make it up. And if he didn't make it up, then there could be a lot of crazy stuff there, especially with all the controversy that he got himself into, talking about his manuscripts with scholars and stuff like this, and they're like, "Oh no, this is crazy," and who's to say that he didn't have access to things that would have had those unique readings? But then also, why would those unique readings have been brought into Sinaiticus? I think the explanation that I gave at the beginning of this video is probably as good as any as to how the unique, crazy stuff got into Sinaiticus, just to try to show the sloppiness of handwritten methods where you could be doing things on a printing press. That's just my thought. So we'll keep going.
he did not have a reputation for arrogance. But while he was in Germany, he got into a vicious conflict with the scholars at the University of Leipzig. And it was there in 1855 that he made enemies with von Tischendorf. So now, years later, when he comes forward and questions...
Not again.
While he was in Germany, he got into a vicious conflict with the scholars at the university. These claimed that Codex Sinaiticus was no ancient manuscript at all, but a modern work created by himself.
Okay, so I put a link in the description under the More section where you guys can go there. You guys can go to cardcarryingchristians.com/Untold Bible Story. This documentary is there. You guys can watch it. Crazy nonsense and my commentary free. You guys can watch it there in its, unadulterated form. Listen to the whole thing if you haven't already. I highly recommend it. Chris Pinto does a pretty good job of talking about the history of the Bible that is not often discussed. That's why I think a lot of it is unwelcome with James White, because being a church history teacher, being a debater, all this stuff goes into him not wanting a lot of conspiratorial stuff to be true. I would recommend to check out, if you have questions about the Jesuits and how much they control things, check out The Jesuit Conspiracy by Jacopo Leone. Check out David Daniels' videos on his YouTube channel about the Jesuits. We made a live stream just last week about the Jesuits, covering some of that stuff. And also check out Johnny Carusi's books. His first one, Illuminati Unmasked, and other books that are related to that. Johnny Carusi, it starts with a C. You guys can go to johnnycarusi.com and check out that stuff. Let's keep going.
And two other Greeks in 1840. While Simon, when he comes forward and questions Codex Sinaiticus, he does so as Tischendorf's old nemesis. Simonides claimed that Codex Sinaiticus was no ancient manuscript at all, but a modern work created by himself and two other Greeks in 1840. While Tischendorf was in the midst of enjoying his fame, the story of Simonides began to be published in the London newspapers.
Simonides?
Needless to say, Tischendorf was furious.
Schneidorf! Idiot!
What followed would be a public debate that would continue
Schweinhund, pig dog.
Newspapers for the next 2 years. In July of 1861, a publication called the Literary Gazette reported that we understand that in literary circles, a rumor prevails that the manuscript now publishing by the Russian government under the direction of Mr. Tischendorf, purporting to be a manuscript Bible of the 4th century, is not an ancient manuscript, but is an entirely modern production written by a gentleman now alive, who will shortly take measures to establish his claim to the authorship. The manuscript is known as the Codex Sinaiticus and has attracted a large amount of attention throughout Europe. Should the rumor prove to be correct, as we believe it will, the disclosures that will follow must be of the greatest interest to archaeology.
Now, one thing that I want to bring up, and you see the burnt page there. I think part of it Tischendorf actually claimed was rescued from the fire. David Daniels highly doubts Tischendorf's whole narrative. It doesn't make a lot of sense in some places, because he apparently found a lot of the pages in a wastebasket, took them back home, went back to the monastery looking for more. Apparently found something being used as a bookmark of some sort. Took it back, came back again. If I'm getting the timelines correct. And then one of the priests hands him the pages that he had back in Britain, or not Britain, in Germany, I guess. I'm not sure. Um, I'm not sure if he was going back and forth to Britain or not, but he would have been German, I believe. Um, he brought it out to him in wrapped in a red cloth, and it's like, wait a minute, they were supposed to. How did he get those? I don't know. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But if that's something that I've got to reread. I've got to re-review that. If anybody can shed any light on that. It sounds like the very pages that he was supposed to have already taken and were hundreds of miles away were all of a sudden just there at St. Catherine's being presented to him in a in a red cloth. Doesn't make a lot of sense. But if he was a Jesuit and he just had the key to Tischendorf's apartment or whatever, and could just waltz and take whatever he wanted and then transport it hundreds of miles away overnight or in the blink of an eye, depending on the power of these Jesuits and what they're capable of as far as black magic is concerned, then that would kind of be a possibility. I don't know. Impossible things I'm starting to realize are a little bit more interesting and likely than we thought. But that's just me going down the conspiratorial rabbit hole in my mind. Not saying that that's true, not saying that I'm pushing that idea, but it would kind of make things make sense. And in the crazy world that we're in, where somebody can walk behind a tree to relieve himself and go missing for weeks when everybody is standing on the other side of the tree waiting for him to be done relieving himself. When something like that happens, you're basically just like, how on earth? What happened? Stuff like this. There's a whole case file um of people that has happened to. They're called the I gotta pee cases of the missing 411. When crazy things like that are happening, you just are like, what else is possible? Things just stop surprising you after you've heard things like this 100 times. But anyways.
In his letter, Simonides says that the controversy began over Codex Sinaiticus when he first saw the manuscript in Liverpool in 1860. And then it was the following year that the newspapers got hold of the story.
Okay. So, I was going to say something and then I forgot what it was. Okay, yep. At one point, Simonides actually challenges Tischendorf to bring, St. Catherine's Monastery actually has a mosque inside of it. It is very well compromised. That's interesting to know, Nick. Thank you. I'm glad that you're actually hanging out with us at 102. I'm not sure. I don't remember where you live in the world, but I'm sure it's not 102 where you are. Nobody could be that dedicated. I'm sure nobody else listening to this is in my time zone. But anyways, right. Simonides had challenged Tischendorf to bring Sinaiticus to London, and he was going to show him. He was going to be like, on such and such page, there's this such and such mark having, and he's like, this is a mark that I made this. He said that he 102 in the afternoon, 3:02 in the afternoon. Ay, 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 Nick. Very cool. So anyways, thank you, dear. I heard you. He challenged Tischendorf to bring the manuscript. He was going to show him, this proves that I did it. I know that this is here. I know these little marks and stuff like this. This is what I put in there to show that I did this, when I was younger. and I could demonstrate it and stuff. And, I just kind of, he's like, bring the manuscript, I'll prove it to you. And Tischendorf's like, absolutely, I accept, I'll be there. And, last minute he pulls out, and it never actually happens. Let's keep watching.
So this story first appears in 1861, but Simonides did not publish his side of the story until 1862. And the only reason he did so is because he was drawn in to the conflict by two of the prominent scholars at that time. The two scholars in question were Samuel P. Tregelles and Fenton John Anthony Hort. Tregelles and Hort believed Sinaiticus.
Poop. We're getting it back up. 1 second. Share screen. Share window. PLC. Maybe it won't let me play it while I'm copying it, because I'm trying to copy it to the desktop, so maybe it would, can't read the source file or disk. Cancel.
For nearly 2,000 years, the world has been turned.
Okay, so there's a different instance.
Over what can only be called recognized my own work as I immediate work, which were put into my hand at Liverpool by Mr. Newton, a friend of when about Maimonides defended his argument. Maimonides wrote, "The be real," and took sides against Simonides almost immediately. Tregelles wrote that the story of Simonides was as false and absurd as possible. In response, Simonides defended his argument as published in the Guardian newspaper in September of 1862, where he said, "When about 2 years ago, I saw the first facsimiles of Tischendorf, which were put into my hand at Liverpool by Mr. Newton, a friend of Dr. Tregelles, I at once recognized my own work, as I immediately told him." In the book, Codex Sinaiticus and the Simonides Affair, author J.K. Elliott confirms that Simonides spoke of his authorship to a man named J.E. Hodgkin in 1860, and in a letter to Sir Thomas Phillips on August 2nd, 1861. Simonides claimed that the manuscript had not been created with any intention to deceive, but was intended by himself and his uncle as a gift to Tsar Nicholas I of Russia.
Now, this is a more of a nerdy thing. If I remember correctly, Sinaiticus is unique as a 4-column uncial manuscript. It makes it very odd among other manuscripts. That's one reason why the oh, the history of this manuscript should be easier to follow if it was something that had any kind of documented history behind it before the 1800s, because something that's that unique should have been recognized. So, anyways, just something to bring up.
Prove his claims. Simonides challenged Tischendorf to a public debate. Yet Tischendorf refused to take part. About this, Simonides wrote, "The real test of the genuineness of the Codex Sinaiticus is neglected. The public were assured that in
No, not again. You've got to be kidding me.
Codex Sinaiticus, he
VLC works for Satan.
of the greatest interest to archaeology. Uncle as a gift to Tsar Nicholas I of Russia. To prove his claims, Simonides challenged Tischendorf to a public debate. The genuineness of the Codex Sinaiticus is neglected. The public were assured that in May, Tischendorf was to be in London, armed with a portion at least of his great codex.
I can't believe how patient you guys are.
Forever hold his peace. Manuscript with him in error. Of his great codex. I have waited in England.
By the way, whether or not Sinaiticus is an 18th century document, it does not make King James onlyism stand or fall. It does not. So it is not essential to believing the King James Bible, to believing that it is an accurate text, that Sinaiticus be a forgery. It is not. It is, however, it is necessary that it not be a forgery in order for the critical text, Westcott and Hort, and all that to stand.
Has not appeared. Let the favorers of the antiquity of the manuscript persuade him to come at once and brave the ordeal, or else forever hold his peace. Yet despite the evasiveness of Tischendorf, most of the newspapers in England defended him and denounced Simonides as a fraud. The attacks were almost fanatical and often unreasonable.
Which is interesting, because when you see an entire group just kind of, closing in like that on the party line, it's either because they're afraid of prejudice of the others that are around them. They have their own prejudices. They all actually see something that it's just like, oh, this is just too ridiculous to even entertain. Or they're being controlled behind the scenes, and there's a whole bunch of scholars that are just kind of reacting as, the modern bots on Twitter that all just kind of go, oh, agreed, yes, good, no, bad. So, and if you guys don't think that James White, in his debate with Chris Pinto, he's like, Chris Pinto's entire documentary is based on the idea that there's a Jesuit behind every bush, and then you finally get to the Sinaiticus thing, and it's the Jesuits that did all this. I don't know if the Jesuits need to have had a hand at all in this idea, because if Simonides simply made the manuscript and it was simply misidentified and it was simply touted as an older document than it was, and I don't see why you would have to say there's a Jesuit involved in any of that process. I really don't see a Jesuit involved personally in that. Maybe there was with Constantine Tischendorf. There's a little bit that might have implied it before he found Sinaiticus, that he was pointed in the direction of such and such things. I'm not sure. But I don't see how I don't see how this stands or falls on any Jesuitical involvement. But if you doubt Jesuitical involvement and manipulation of history, just check out the book by Jacopo Leone, The Jesuit Conspiracy. Yeah, let's keep going.
Could Tischendorf's relationship with Rome have had something to do with it? During this same era, Protestant historian J.A. Wiley wrote about the Jesuits' influence in English media.
Yes, he wrote about it. And James White, during the debate and afterwards, said that it was his opinion that the Jesuits were involved because he was making a statement that could not be supported. Because, of course, a covert Jesuit conspiracy is going to have no evidence by its very nature, and you can't prove it. So, Wiley is stating an opinion about the Jesuits' control of the media. Chris Pinto calls it a documented fact. I have not read Wiley's book personally. Maybe one of my listeners here has. If he does document those things, which I've seen others do it, so Wiley of documenting it is not a stretch. If he did, and the Jesuits were in control of the media, which they still are, they still would be. According to Johnny Carucci, they are basically the group behind everything that used to be called the Illuminati. They still are. Let's keep reading, or listening, rather.
In his book on the Jesuits' morals, maxims, and plots, he said that there are two institutions in especial to which the Jesuits will lay siege. These are the press and the pulpit.
The pulpit.
The press,
remember that,
is already manipulated by them, to an extent of which the public but little dream.
And that's important, because the entire idea is that they are very laborious, very extremely intelligent, 100% dedicated to their leadership, just to a fanatical cultic level, and that they have the background of every man, woman, and child that enters the earth. That is one of their goals. So, yeah, it's not unlikely that they would have been in control of the press in 1900 when James White mentions it. I believe it was in the debate. He's like, oh, as early as 1900. No, they would have been in control of the media before the media was created. He doesn't understand the extent of this conspiracy. Let's keep going. And of course, we don't want to say that all information therefore cannot be trusted because it is controlled by evil forces. We can't do that. We still have to deal with what we have in front of us, where we're still dealing with things that are documentable. We still have to bring a burden of proof. We still have to do due process. We still have to do all sorts of things. We can't just assume that, we can't fact proof our conspiracy theories. We can't do that. Just because there's a conspiracy doesn't mean that you can ignore everything. Understanding the depth of the conspiracy can help you amalgamate facts into that conspiracy, but it also still doesn't prove what you're thinking. So, let's keep going.
The whole English press of the world is supervised, and the word is passed round how writers, speakers, and causes are to be handled, and applause.
That doesn't sound familiar.
Dealt out just as it may accord with the interests and wishes of Rome.
Now, does that mean that the Pope, whatever his name is now, is just kind of saying, oh no, you Jesuits need to do this and that, and they all go, yes sir, and then they go do whatever? And these little guys in black hoods and stuff like this run around, with clipboards and headsets and tell everybody to get up or lay down or go to sleep or wake up or whatever. Not really. Not really at all. Because the Pope and Rome and stuff like that are not actually the ones in control. Not at all. The Jesuits do not look to the white Pope for their leadership. And I'm not implying that they directly go to Satan either. They go to a guy called the Black Pope because of his place in not being in the light, and also how, what he wears. And so there's I think those are the two reasons. There's another reason I think that they call the Black Pope. But anyways, the Jesuit general is called the Black Pope. So he basically gives, the orders out, and these people execute. They execute. That's for sure.
Yet Simonides was not without his supporters. Another paper, called the Literary Churchman, questioned the antiquity of Codex Sinaiticus and argued that Simonides should be heard. They said, "For ourselves, we must profess entire impartiality."
Yes.
Though we were quite ready from the first to admit the importance of the discovery of Tischendorf, we are not prepared at this moment to say with Dr. Trigellus that the statements of Simonides are as false and absurd as possible. Tischendorf applies these terms, false and absurd, just now to Trigellus himself. The reason Tischendorf attacked Trigellus was because he disagreed with him about the writing of Codex Sinaiticus. Trigellus said, "On one point, I believe that I differ materially from Tischendorf as to the writing of the manuscript. He thinks that he sees traces of various hands having been employed,
like James White,
in such a way that a change of writer must have frequently taken place."
Now that's interesting, because that is one of the major points that James White and the paleographers of today, they say, oh, Sinaiticus was obviously not written by one man, because we think that we see different styles of handwriting in these block capital unsealed, in this black unsealed script. So if that's not the case, that only leaves one evidence that the Sinaitic manuscript is of ancient origins. That is, its unique readings. And if those fall, I'm telling you guys, we can't know until legitimate impartial study has been done to verify the chemical composition of the Sinaitic Codex. It's ink, it's paper. The paper can't be the only thing that's tested. You can get old paper anywhere. Old ink is a little harder to get. Lots of things can be used to verify. It's phenomenal. I highly recommend that you guys watch the two videos that David Daniels has on the Big Con. They're on YouTube. Links in the description. It's in one of those playlists there by him. And I think I also include it on our page, cardcarryingchristians.com/ Alephgate. I'm going to change it to Sinaiticus, I think, at some point, but that'll happen in the future.
I believe that the difference is to be attributed to the scribe having more or less ink in his style, the ink being more or less thick, and the surface of the vellum slightly varying. In other words, the scribe dips his stylus into an inkwell, and when he first begins to write, there's a lot of ink on it. But sooner or later, the ink runs thin. In places where the ink ran thin, Tischendorf believed that this signified a change of writers, and hence the passage of time. Tregellus, on the other hand, believed that it was the same scribe, it's just that he sometimes ran low on ink. That was the difference.
White didn't mention that one, I don't think.
Factor in that Tischendorf spreads his scribes and correctors from the 4th century all the way to the 7th century, a span of some 300 years. You're left wondering just how precise the scientific methods were that they employed. Also consider that similar contentions are made about ancient bones that are dug up out of the ground, where the scientists tell us that these are millions of years old and so forth. Do they really have the ability to date bones that way? And did Tischendorf really have the ability to date ancient manuscripts? After the initial attacks against him began, Simonides asserted that these scholars in reality knew little or nothing about ancient manuscripts. In response to one of his critics, he wrote, "Neither you nor Tischendorf possess the true knowledge of paleographical science. You have only learned to say at random, this is genuine and this is spurious, but you do not know the reason." This comment might be brushed aside, but for the often repeated testimony that Simonides exceeded his contemporaries in the expertise of manuscript evidence. James Farrar, in his 1907 book on literary forgeries, wrote that Tischendorf was only the senior of Simonides by 5 years, and in the science of paleography had neither his knowledge nor his experience. Another scholar whose testimony was chiefly regarded was Henry Bradshaw, keeper of manuscripts at the Cambridge University Library. Bradshaw sided with Tischendorf, and once this was known, he was confronted in person by Simonides. In a letter describing the encounter, Bradshaw wrote, "Dr. Simonides wrote to me to convince me and my friends that it was quite possible for him to have written the volume in question."
14808.
He had invited He provided many details any such idea. But I have knowledge of paleographical science, me, to convince me and my friends that it was quite in the West were as ignorant of Greek as the Greeks are of Latin. But the great question was, how do you satisfy yourselves of the genuineness of any manuscript? I first replied that it was really difficult to define, that it seemed to be more a kind of instinct than anything else. Dr. Simonides and his friend.
Now, this is something that Chris Pinto accused James White, not necessarily accused, but, basically he said that James White's ideas were based on assumptions. Now, James White came back and he's like, hey, no, your ideas are based on assumptions because you're just assuming Jesuits are everywhere, and you're assuming that these unique readings would have come from the 3 manuscripts that Simonides didn't name that were used to create Sinaiticus. So there's assumptions there. But I think that one of the reasons that Chris Pinto brings up the idea that James White's ideas are based on assumptions is because of this kind of thing, where the assumptions are, oh, well, I just kind of feel that, this or that. I just kind of, it's an instinctive thing. Oh, this is pretty old. Yeah, this is, I probably wouldn't say 500s, maybe 450, 430. Yeah, probably, based on that, probably around 3 395, 394, something around in there is probably what I think. Okay, nice. That's scholarliness for you right there.
Readily caught at this as too much like vague assertion, and they naturally ridiculed any such idea. But I further said that I had lived for 6 years past in the constant, almost daily habit of examining manuscripts. Bradshaw then applied this principle to his opinion of Codex Sinaiticus. When Simonides objected, Bradshaw said, I told him, as politely as I could, that I was not to be convinced against the evidence of my senses. So Bradshaw essentially admitted that there was no real scientific proof as to the age of Codex Sinaiticus.
That's also something that James White didn't mention. I would love to hear the scholarly rebuttal to that. I would love to hear the context of that. I would love to hear all sorts of things about it. That needs to be well done. That needs to be talked about. It would be very interesting to see if he had some kind of motivation for dating manuscripts. If somebody, either slipped him, hashish or something. I don't know what they would have used back then. Um, who knows? Conspiracy theories. That's what it is. That's what I'm coming up with at that point. But there's something going on. Because you can't just stand there looking all scholarly and prestigious and say, oh, I've spent 6 years staring at manuscripts all day long, and now I know. Okay, got it. Thanks for the... Oh, boy.
And he ultimately admitted that all he trusted in were his senses or his instincts about the manuscript. And Bradshaw...
Here we go again. Nobody's going to watch this later on. It's just way too painful.
After he ridiculed any such idea. It was Professor Tischendorf's ignorance and inexperience in 18... Bradshaw further of Russia. Dr. Simonides always maintained that the Mount Athos Bible, meaning Codex Sinaiticus, written in 1840 for the Emperor of Russia, was not meant to deceive anyone, that it was Professor Tischendorf's ignorance and inexperience which rendered him so easily deceived where no deception was intended.
Now that's key. No conspiracy.
Mount Athos was the location.
NJN. No Jesuit necessary.
He provided many details. Mount Athos was the location where Simonides claimed he had created the Codex.
There we go. Okay.
He provided many details for how the manuscript had been written and how it came to be at Mount Sinai. He also provided many names of those in the Greek world who he said could confirm that he created the manuscript.
I would love to read the whole story of that he gave.
Strangely, most of these details were never investigated, either by the supporters of Tischendorf or by the newspapers at the time. In 1907, James Farrar wrote that the controversy cannot be said to have been settled by the mere opinions of Tregellus or Bradshaw, who examined the Codex 2 months before Simonides had made his claim to it as his work, so that they had no reason to examine it with suspicion.
Yes. Now here's the thing too. White, another thing that he said is, we can't really talk with Farrar because, hey, he wasn't a manuscript guy. He didn't know anything about collation. He didn't know anything about Greek. He was writing about purely literary matters. And his judgment on Tregellus and Bradshaw and people like this, we can't really go with what he says because he doesn't realize how taxing it is and how amazing you have to be in your brain to be able to evaluate manuscripts on this level. You have to be like James White to be able to accomplish such a daring feat, for crying out loud. So, basically discount what he says because Tregellus and Bradshaw were capable scholars. They would have recognized if it was a forgery, okay. But you also kind of got to remember, like what Farrar said, They didn't have any reason to look at it and say, hey, I think this is an 18th century document, actually. They didn't have a reason to look at it that way. The only thing that they had to look at was letters that looked the same, paper that looked old, paper that felt old, paper that smelled old, and just kind of went like, yep, this feels like, yeah, it's 1500 years old or whatever. My math brain is not functioning at 1:34 in the morning. So that's why we should probably listen to Farrar, because he's like, there's no reason that they would have looked at it and gone like, this looks a little sus, guys.
But could there have been some other motive that drove the critical scholars at this time?
Now, that's an assumption, but I think it's a good assumption, because there's motives everywhere, guys. Lots and lots of motives, lots and lots of blackmail, lots and lots of crazy things that we look at and we're just like, and we forget about it. We think about it for a few minutes. We're just like, what was that? And then we're just like, I don't know. And then we just forget about it, and we just kind of excuse it as such or such other thing. But there's a lot of crazy stuff out there that's happening. A lot of abuse that is being used as blackmail. That's a good motivation for anything. I don't know. They didn't have to be getting paid. Just saying, slipping somebody some money under the table is not always the payoff. It's not always the motive.
Simonides was a real threat to the academic establishment of Western Europe. If what he claimed was true, it would have shown that Tregellus, Bradshaw, Hort, and Tischendorf knew little or nothing about dating ancient texts. So you can imagine how hard they fought to discredit him. Not only that, but Simonides was working at the time with a man named Joseph Mayer, who was the founder of the Mayer Museum in Liverpool. And while there, Mr. Mayer had him come and examine a series of ancient Egyptian scrolls that he had purchased years before. So Mr. Mayer brings Simonides to the museum, and what he uncovered were first century fragments and parchments that shattered some of the claims that were being made by the higher critics. He found a first century fragment of the Gospel of Matthew that was dated within 15 years of the ascension of Christ. And this proved that Matthew was the first gospel, not Mark, and that it was originally written in Greek, not in Hebrew or Aramaic, as the critics had speculated.
That's a that's a huge thing with Hebrew roots people, is that Matthew was originally written in Hebrew. I don't see why it wouldn't have been, really. It could have been. I really don't have a dog in that fight. But Matthew being the first gospel written, Origin, the guy, he I believe it was him that said that that Matthew was written first instead of Mark. I don't actually think that anybody thinks that Mark was the first gospel until the higher critics came along. Anywho, I would have to see more on that one.
Also, he displayed a first century scroll that contained 1 John 5:7.
That's huge.
Which is a hotly disputed verse among higher critics. And this proved that they were wrong, and that the...
So, if you guys go to our links down in the description for merch, you guys can get yourself a shirt or a mug or whatever that says real Bibles have 1 John 5:7. That's down there just to let you know. And 1 John 5:7 is, for there are three that bear record in heaven, the Father, the Word, and the Holy Ghost, and these three are one. That's missing from modern Bibles. It's in the King James Bible. If it was in a first century manuscript, that is huge. That's a manuscript. If it was in the first century, nobody chemically tested it. But if it was indeed a first century manuscript, that would be astronomical, because if that verse is legit, we know nothing. The scientist people, like James White has said, all of textual critical scholarship falls into little tiny pieces and blows away in the wind. All of it. Kaput. Nonsense. Every modern Bible version has to be completely overhauled. We don't know anything about textual criticism if 1 John 5:7 is correct, because it's not in the majority of Greek manuscripts. It's only supposed to have been invented in like the 500s or something like this. I forget where it first was supposed to have sprung into existence. But if it was indeed legitimate, if it should be in there, if it is inspired by God, which it seems all indications are, that one verse is the bomb. It is. Sorry. If that verse belongs in the Bible, yeah. Textual criticism, modern Bible versions, everything. You guys might not realize the vast implications of 1 John 5:7 being legit, but they are far-reaching. They are all-encompassing.
Verse was not invented in later centuries, as they have been saying. And this was on display at Cambridge University and then at the Royal Society in London. And if you read the accounts, these things were so controversial that some later historians tried to claim that Simonides had sold this scroll of the Gospel of Matthew to Mr. Mayer as some kind of forgery or something. But if you read the newspaper accounts, it's very clear. Mr. Mayer acknowledged that, in fact, he had purchased the scroll years before he ever met Constantine Simonides. So there was a lot of propaganda and false accusation that came against Simonides because these discoveries were so threatening to what the critics wanted to believe. In December of 1862, the London Review wrote that the few believers in Simonides represented him as a man whose towering genius had aroused the envy alike of Grecian professors, German students, and English librarians, and banded them together in a conspiracy to crush him.
Now that excludes Jesuits. That's just like, you know what? People really don't like Simonides or Simonides or however you pronounce it. People really don't like this guy. So let's just, try to take him out. He's just causing way too many problems. That would imply to me that the manuscripts that he would have had access to at that point that he's toting around with him, showing everybody and stuff like this. And, you guys are as ignorant of Greek as I am of Latin. Or not him, but the Greeks are of Latin. Just, going after them like that. I could see where a lot of people would be extremely ruffled. You read something like The Suppressed History of America by I forget the one guy's name. Xavier Hayes was the co-author. You read that kind of thing, and it's just like, wow, scientists and all this stuff are just extremely, extremely rabidly biased. If you don't conform, you're out. Get out of here. You're not a scientist. You lose your degree. You lose your funding. Listen to Expelled No Intelligence Allowed. That stuff is not unfamiliar to Christianity. Good Christian scholarship and stuff like this. Even Dr. Ruckman talked about people that he knew that believed the King James Bible was God's word. They would go to college. They'd try to graduate with, degrees or whatever in Greek and stuff like this. If they didn't admit by the end of the thing that the King James Bible was in all kinds of egregious error and not the word of God, they would not be allowed to graduate. And they would, they basically they would not get their degree unless they admitted that one thing. And they didn't. These people that he mentioned, they didn't get their degree after all the work that they put in, after having all the right answers, after having the knowledge. They don't get the piece of paper that says they're smart after paying all the money, after sitting through all the classes, after memorizing all the information. That's frustrating, and I can see their faces looking just like Tregellis here. Or not Tregellis, Tischendorf. Now this is interesting. Every word. There he is, Kalinikos.
In December of 1862, a publication called the Brighton Observer reported that Professor Tischendorf, having visited the Holy Land, returned to Europe with a voluminous manuscript that he obtained from the library of the monastery of Mount Sinai, the earliest known copy of the Bible. In time, one of the parts fell into the hands of Simonides, who at once recognized it as a manuscript he had himself executed. He made his assertion public that the Codex Sinaiticus had been written by himself. But Tischendorf...
Now, why would you make such an absurd claim if you were just trying to get back at Tischendorf for humiliating you or something like that? Why would you just humiliate yourself even more by making such an absurd claim? Unless you genuinely thought that you could prove that. There's no reason to make this story up. Why would Simonides, what could possibly his motivation have been to say that Sinaiticus was a forgery? Not a forgery, but a draft to a manuscript that, as a draft being misunderstood as an ancient manuscript by Tischendorf, and that he didn't know what he was talking about. Why would you make such a wild claim if you didn't think you could back it up? That is the million-dollar question. I would love to hear any explanation as to why he would do that. Maybe it's just so crazy that it would have been believed. But then again, it's still all the same. It still makes no sense. How the extent that it went to and the ridicule that he faced and leaving saying that he had told the entire truth. How does it make sense? Tischendorf doesn't have to have made anything up. Maybe he found those darkened pages just the way they were, and maybe he didn't treat them with lemon juice like some people have said. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he's completely innocent. Maybe. It's a high possibility in my mind right now that Tischendorf was just didn't know what he was doing. Saw a manuscript, saw it looked old, saw somebody wrote it differently than more modern unsealed Greek or whatever, and he's just like, oh well, here, this is an extremely old codex. And then Simonides just comes along and is just like, no, actually, I wrote it that way on purpose. I wrote it this way. You just don't know what you're talking about. And I can prove it. Why would he say that? It makes zero sense. Call on the manuscript experts. Call on the people out there that have studied this. Call on the people that poo-pooed it. Call on the people that say James White won the debate hands down. Chris Pinto didn't have a conspiracy leg to stand on. Be like, why did he make up that story? Was he just trying to get it even with Tischendorf and just trying to be a thorn in his side? Why be so elaborate? Why be so detailed? And the inconsistencies that people may point out in his story, like the person that wrote the introduction to the Jesuit conspiracy by Jacopo Leone, things that seem to be inconsistent, those would have been in a consistent inventor of stories. They would have gone over that completely made up story and just made it so that it was all consistent. So inconsistencies in a story can often prove its validity. Like Jacopo Leone said, he's like, I am just telling you that what I'm writing here is, you might think that that's inconsistent. I'm just going to say this is exactly how it happened. It's exactly how I remember it. I'm sorry. This is just how it happened. If you don't think this or that is consistent, then okay. But I'm just telling you, I wrote down everything because, and that's one thing with SRA. We might never get to that tonight. We might have to do that next time. We might have to do a separate thing. I don't know. I highly recommend that you guys pick up a copy of Bill Schneeblin's book. You guys can go to cardcarryingchristians.com/xvampire, as one word, no dashes. And you can buy a copy of his book, Lucifer Dethroned, or I want to get some other books up there. Fritz Springmeier, Kathy O'Brien, people like that. Look in the back of Bill Schneeblin's book. It gives signs of what to look for in an SRA victim. And like these kids will come forward and they'll say, such and such person did such and such thing to me. His name was Steve or something like this. And oh yeah, such and such person, Steve did this to me. Oh, Steve. Okay. Who is Steve? As they're interviewing these children, different places. And well, Steve was 6'2", sandy blonde hair, no beard. Oh, the other kid says Steve was 5'4", 5'5", balding, a brown hair, thin mustache. That's an inconsistency. Let me tell you, they put that in there purposefully so that the kids, when they go back, they won't be believed. There won't be an investigation. That's how a lot of it is being gotten away with. Same thing with, people accuse them of, doing let's just say fatal things to infants. And they say, where's the body? You said they buried the body. Where is it? It's not there. Because as they testify over and over and over again, they dig it back up right afterwards. They use it, they dispose of it, they cover it up so that there is no investigation. There is no trail to follow. It's intentional. That's how they aren't caught. I'm not saying that everybody that calls himself a Satanist is involved. I'm not saying that at all. But there are plenty of people out there that call themselves Satanists that are involved in these things. And it is horrifying. And it is closer to you than you think.
The learned men of Germany refused to recognize the claims of Simonides and continued its publication. Things went on this way. Some persons believing Simonides, some Tischendorf. When suddenly a Greek archimandrite wrote to the English papers from Alexandria, corroborating the statement of Simonides and stating that he remembered seeing Simonides engaged in writing out the copy of the Bible in question in the ancient Greek characters on Mount Athos. The Greek monk mentioned in the article was a friend of Simonides whose name was Callinicos. Callinicos wrote a series of letters to the English newspapers, confirming the story of Simonides and denouncing Tischendorf, whom he called the master and pupil of all guile and all wickedness.
Now that right there is the missing chapter at the end of the I think at the end of the debate, Chris Pinto and James White. Chris Pinto almost got to this point. He almost got there. He was cut short because of the limitations of the time frame that they were working with for the format of the debate. He was going to get into the character of Tischendorf and what people said about him. Callinicos there accuses him of being, whatever, child of all wickedness and guile or something like this, or the pupil, or I forget what it just said. Okay, guys, it's almost 2 in the morning. That is when James White's point was, well, you include all this stuff about, Tischendorf being this and that, and then you just kind of discount Simonides being a forger. Everybody said that he was a forger. Why do you discount that? And now if Tischendorf would have been called a forger, even by one person, don't you think it would have spent at least 20 minutes in a 3-hour documentary on that? And Chris Pinto started to answer, but then he didn't get to this part. Now, I guess James White, when he saw the documentary, claims he watched it, missed that part. Probably just too busy scribbling down notes or laughing. Not sure. Anyways, we'll recommence.
In one of his letters, published in the Literary Churchman, Callinicos wrote, I repeat that the manuscript in dispute is the work of the unwearied Simonides and of no other person. A portion of this was secretly removed from Mount Sinai by Professor Tischendorf.
The unwearied Simonides. I feel like I could still go on until 2:30 probably, but I don't think it's going to last that long. Once we're done with this, we got to go. But yeah, and you guys, the 4 of you that are watching right now, kudos. You guys are amazing. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It is humbling to think that you guys want to hang out with me this late. It is mind-blowing. Charles Evans is probably asleep by his washing machine. Probably the only one that's awake right now is my wife and Nick Sayers.
In 1844, the rest, with inconceivable recklessness, he mutilated and tampered with, according to his liking, in the year 1859.
Interesting.
Some leaves he destroyed, especially such as contain the acrostics of Simonides.
Ooh.
What's interesting is Callinicos' mention of how Tischendorf destroyed the pages that had the markings of Simonides on them, which may explain why some of the pages were burned.
Now, that's the literal smoking gun right there. Because if Simonides put in little things in there, like, making such and such letters bolder that would kind of spell something out or whatever, things like that. Oh, this says Simonides in it. Roasty toasty manuscript. I don't know. Maybe that happened. That's what Callinicos said. I know that Chris Pinto, I think it was Chris Pinto. No, it was David Daniels, I think, that mentioned how the monks in St. Catherine's still, they've got long memories over there, still don't like Tischendorf. They still don't like him. Apparently.
It's important to remember that to this day, the monks at Mount Sinai deny Tischendorf's story and his claim that he found the manuscript in a rubbish basket. So where would the burned pages of the manuscript have come from?
That's interesting. That's a nice square burn right there. That looks like that was cut and singed. I don't know. Anyways, something to think about too. The waste paper basket. He said that it was a waste paper basket, that they were using it as kindling to light fires and stuff like this. They're using these ancient manuscripts, these careless, idiotic scribes or monks that don't know what's going on around here. Oh, I can't believe you're burning such ancient manuscripts. Maybe it was scrap paper because they put it in there because it was their rough draft of a gift to the Tsar that was going to be done, a while ago. I'm not sure how it made it all the way from Athos to St. Catherine's, like Chris said. Simonides talked about that, but I wouldn't see a problem in using it as kindling if it was just like the way that Simonides said it. However, I think it was the monks that actually said that he took it out of a container where they actually stored valuable documents, and he wasn't supposed to do that. It just keeps getting weirder and weirder. I mean, I'm not personally 100% sold on the whole Simonides affair thing as Chris Pinto puts it out. David Daniels does a lot of research too. He brings out a lot of things that Chris Pinto doesn't talk about. It's pretty crazy. I'd like to see David Daniels, who is a Greek guy, do a debate with James White, or even have a conversation with him. That would be a fascinating thing to hear to me, because David Daniels he's really wonked out on this topic. Like I said, the links to both of his books and a lot of his videos and playlists are in the description of this video. So yeah.
Is it possible that Tischendorf burned parts of them to destroy the markings of Simonides, as Callinicos suggests?
Now, see, that is not a like James White. Oh, could this be? Oh, could that be? When you hear that, okay, maybe it sounds good. But listen, Callinicos said that that's what happened. If Callinicos said that that's what's happened, the only question is not a conspiracy theory. It's a possibility that what Callinicos said was true. That's what it is at that point. It's not a, could Tischendorf have burned these pages? Oh, Tischendorf might have burned the pages. It might have been him, or it could have been a Jesuit, man. No. If Callinicos said that Tischendorf did burn them, okay, either he's making up a story or it happened that way.
And this might explain why he came up with a story about the monks throwing the pages into the fire later on, a story which nobody really seems to believe.
It wouldn't make any sense. If they're ancient documents, why would they be burning them?
Callinicos claimed that he himself had been at St. Catherine's Monastery when Tischendorf was there, and that Tischendorf took the first pages of the manuscript without permission. He said, "I further declare that the codex which Dr. Tischendorf obtained is the identical codex which Simonides wrote, inasmuch as I saw it in the hands of Tischendorf and recognized the work." Callinicos also claimed that the manuscript had been washed with lemon juice and herbs to weaken the appearance of the letters and to give it a more ancient look. In response to these accusations, the supporters of Tischendorf
1:59:14. Come on, VLC, you can do it.
Insisted that Simonides had forged the letters himself, and they claimed that Callinicos was a fictional character. Yet in his book, James Farrar tells us that Callinicos was indeed a real person, and that his letters cannot be brushed aside as the testimony of a fabulous being.
Just because he existed doesn't mean he wrote them.
Callinicos bear within them an almost prophetic warning about the Codex. He wrote to the newspapers in 1862 that you will greatly sin in foisting on the world a new manuscript as an old one.
Oh boy, listen.
Especially a manuscript containing the Holy Scriptures. Injury to the church must accrue from all this, even from the evidently numerous corrections of the manuscript.
Wow, guys. One of James White's things that he said at the end of his introduction to when he played the entire debate between him and Chris Pinto, one of the things that he said at the end of his introduction was that None of the liberals, none of the, whacked out, crazy, people that are out there are holding up Sinaiticus as their thing. And, this is why I'm a liberal, because your guys' oldest Bible is absolutely not the way it is right now, and stuff like this. Guys, this has gotten really deep. I'm not surprised it's run to 3 hours. This is crazy stuff, and it just keeps getting crazier. The thing is that this Kalinikos guy is just like, if you guys take this crazy manuscript and start making the Bible, saying that the Bible should be more like this crazy manuscript that was a rough draft of craziness, that my little conspiracy theory that I came up with just a little while ago, intentional craziness, mimicking the craziness of the Alexandrian quote-unquote text type, which is not a text type. They disagree with themselves more than they disagree with Byzantine. At least that's what I've heard. Oh, man. If that was intentional, and then it gets taken and foisted, as Klinikos wrote, on the world, this guy had concern. He had doctrinal concern. He had religious concern. He had theological concerns about this. He was not just simply going after it as, ooh, look at this ancient book, He was like, think about what this could do to Christianity. Think about the damage that could be done. Remember that guy? What was he on? This show called The Dean Show. I remember seeing that on YouTube. It was a long time ago. This guy is interviewing this old fat guy with the big Santa Claus beard. He's a Muslim now, apparently, American Muslim, and he embraced Islam after he went to, I believe it was Liberty University. And he said, we got there, we started looking at everything, and I was in the Greek text stuff and, learning all this stuff. And then they start teaching us about Sinaiticus and how Sinaiticus is so old and so revered, and how these different older manuscripts they're so different from the Bible we have today. And he's just like, well, so much for the Bible, whatever that is, being God's word. That's the chick track. Oh, what was it called? Counterfeit, I think. That is the chick track, where the kid goes to college, gets his faith crushed, runs out, and becomes, just a crazy guy on the street after becoming newly saved. And, years later finds out such and such about the preservation of the Bible, and, tears in his eyes and stuff like this. He's just like, the Bible is something that I can put my faith back in now. That poor Muslim guy is that guy. Went to college, found out about this whole manuscript thing. Dr. White may not want to acknowledge it. And if Dr. White ever listens to this, wow, I can't believe that you listened to this, sir. We're going on 2 3/4 hours. But just not willing to recognize how that piece of it tears things apart to where the Bible's a non-issue. And it doesn't have to be an issue to every single person who's just like, I had my faith crushed. Not everybody has that origin story. Everybody comes from a different perspective. Everybody's being taught by somebody else. The teachers of their teachers were probably raised in Christian homes, and something fell apart for them, and they never looked back. Joy Foss's book, The Word God Will Keep It, documents several places where someone was like, you know what, the RV came out, showed me that King James Bible was just all a bunch of nonsense. Probably a lot of it was of occult symbolism anyways. So what I did is I went out and I became a Rosicrucian. And I'm so glad I'm not an ignorant Christian anymore. And then that person's going to talk to a kid that's, 6, 12, 8, who knows, that may not even be being raised in a Christian household, and be like, those Christians, that's stupid, ignorant mindset. We've got to rise above that. The necessity of Sinaiticus having a devastating effect on modern history is not limited to the verbal outbursts of 30-year-old, 60-year-old women with pink pixie cuts, okay? Screaming about Trump and things like this. That's not sloppy statements. I appreciate James White as a heavyweight debater of a lot of different things. Some good stuff he's put out. But I don't know. I guess I'm not sure what I guess. Let's just keep listening for now.
Tischendorf originally documented some 14,800 corrections.
Which, listen, this is one of the inconsistencies where I'm just like, did Simonides really do this? If there's that many corrections in the entire Bible of a 19-year-old Simonides making this, it's like, wow, that's a lot of corrections. I mean, it's still a big book. It's got a lot of chapters in it. Like, what is it? 1,800 something or whatever, or 1,081. I forget what it is for chapters in the Bible. I mean, that's still a sizable amount. It's a few mistakes per chapter. That's not terrible, I guess, but it's still a lot of corrections for somebody that was supposed to have been so brilliant. I'm going to be right back. Okay? I'm going to take myself a quick break. We'll come back and we'll finish this up. Okay, Mai's back. Sorry. I told you I had to take a break, Spray Arm. I'm sorry. Lost at least 2 people. They're starting to reconsider. They're like, I don't know if I'm watching it this late. I don't blame you guys. It was a crazy evening we've had. And boom.
Today, the Codex Sinaiticus has its home at the British Library in London. In 2009, they finished the Codex Sinaiticus project, which was aimed at fully examining Tischendorf's famous manuscript.
Except chemical testing.
In 2008, we interviewed Dr. Juan Garces, one of the curators of the project, while the work was still in progress.
Part of the Codex Sinaiticus project is to gather all the material, commission top scholars to go through that material and write reports, sit around a table and discuss it and publish it all. First of all, the documents, but also the
Okay. Built-in index. Play as is. Do not play. Play as is for now. I'm going to try opening it on the desktop. It should have transferred by now. No, of course not. Copy to desktop. Build index, then play. Okay, hopefully it fixes the AVI file a little bit and we can keep going.
Century, it was Professor and in one of Kalinikos that he remembered seeing Simonides engaged in writing out.
And of course, I zoom in on the compass.
Today, the Codex Sinaiticus has its home at the British Library. Yet, incredibly, once the British Library published their website, we found that they omitted most all of the documented history about Codex Sinaiticus. They ignored Tischendorf's own testimony about finding the manuscript in a rubbish basket. Instead, they claimed that the monks
Please.
brought it to his attention in 1844. And while they said they were going to tell the full story, their website makes no mention of the 4-year controversy with Constantine Simonides. We also spoke with Dr. Scott McKendrick, the head of Western manuscripts, about the comparison between Sinaiticus and the Codex Vaticanus.
They're different also in quite one critical way, in that Sinaiticus, or two ways actually, I'd say, two ways. One is that Vaticanus does not have the extent of correction. That's a very critical difference. Sinaiticus is the most corrected manuscript of a Greek manuscript of the scriptures.
That makes sense if it's a draft.
Vaticanus has a very strange appearance. When you look at it as a sort of manuscript expert, although you know that people tell you that it's a 4th century manuscript, it actually looks like a 15th century manuscript. And there's one very simple reason for that, is that almost the entire text has been overwritten by a 15th century scribe. Not only that, he's added in 15th century.
That's interesting. Come on, VLC, you can do it. Come on. Ay, guys, I tell you what, we gotta get this tech thing figured out. But guys, this is on a week-by-week basis. We do this weekly. We do it every Friday night. It doesn't give me a lot of time for tech upgrades, but even being on StreamYard tonight is a huge leap for us. And trying to work the bugs out of it is going to be a whole nother process. So you guys are watching the struggle live from the comfort of your homes. Oh, there it goes. Didn't even have to click it. Vaticanus is not a 15th century manuscript. It's it's a 4th century manuscript. That's documented history. Okay. When did they first start telling you that it was a 4th century manuscript? David Daniels gets into some of that stuff. Very well, I might add. I'd love to see a debate. Shh.
Is it possible?
Quiet. We're concocting conspiracy theories here.
That the reason Codex Vaticanus has a strange and even newer appearance is that it may not be a truly ancient manuscript. The earliest recorded date for
could it be? It's like, no, it's just trying to get you to ask questions, you know.
When it was first entered into the record of the Vatican Library. The manuscript had formerly been rejected by Erasmus and the Reformers because they believed it was corrupt.
Not because it was corrupt, that it was corrupted at a certain point in history.
Yet somehow, the warnings of the Reformation were completely ignored by Tischendorf and the scholars who supported him. They all embraced Vaticanus without questioning its authenticity. or considering that it may have been one of Rome's many historic forgeries.
Now that's the thing. I don't know if when Rome first brought it onto the scene, they didn't say that it was a 4th century manuscript. That came much later. It just kept on being assigned an older and older and older date, if I remember correctly. This, but this thing about it possibly being from the 15th century just kind of keeps making more and more sense. I know Erasmus did reject it. But that, along with a few other manuscripts, I think, that he claimed were corrupted at some, I forget what point in history he said. They didn't just believe that they were corrupt. They didn't just say, oh, well, I don't like those missing verses or something like that. They had reasons for rejecting it. It would turn them over in their graves if they knew that that text was the standard text and that Westcott and Hort would take B as their absolute standard. And the second only to that manuscript is Sinaiticus. B was the big boss. It's interesting, and then that's how you have just it is literally a new Christianity today, guys. Literally, it's phenomenal. Like Phil Stringer said, the two twins that were listening to him talk about the differences in Bibles and stuff like that. One was a Unitarian, one was a Baptist. The Unitarian comes up to him later on and is like, you know what? I was listening to what you were saying about the difference between the RSV and the King James Bible, and now I realize why mine and my sister's religions are so different. I shared this video earlier on YouTube. The cults versus the King James Bible or something like this, Phil Stringer. Because our Bibles are completely different Bibles. That's why our religions are so different. That's why I'm a Unitarian and she is a Baptist. Fascinating how a text type, a Bible written a certain way, if you're accepting that as the Bible, that it can completely change the outcome in your personal beliefs, your personal religion. Uncanny, wouldn't you say? It's because that, like Mike Hoggard said, the Bible is the DNA of the church. You change the DNA, you change the child, you change the individual, you change the church.
Among this company of scholars was F.H.A. Scribner, another prominent academic who also opposed Constantine Simonides. The strange thing about all of these guys, Bradshaw, Scribner, Tregellus, Hort.
Please tell us what is a strange thing. Keep playing, please. Come on. 20521. You can do it, Chris. Tell the world. Technology. Like I've said, guys, this is a labor of love.
In this BBC documentary, the latest number of corrections is given by Dr. McKendrick, along with the theological conclusions they are said to imply.
On closer inspection, the text of the Codex Sinaiticus is littered with revisions. It is history's most altered biblical manuscript, and within those changes lie its real theological secrets.
That's why it would be of value to Westcott and Hort, because they taught that doctrinal passages are totally sus, bro. Totally sus. Suspect. They're not to be trusted. Because they're doctrinal. So they were added in there because they were doctrinal. Because the Bible was originally not very good doctrinally. it got smoothed out over time. And if you believe that about the Bible, you might as well be a Unitarian. And that would have been your Westcott and Hort. Pillars of the faith, indeed. Whose faith?
Approximately 23,000 corrections in all that survives, which is an extraordinary rate of correction. It means that on average there are about 30 corrections on each page.
Given the quality of the calligraphy, scholars were surprised to find so many changes.
Interesting point, because the quality of the calligraphy, if Simonides wrote this, and if he had a good hand for calligraphy, then how is it surprising if he did that as a young person and then they had all the corrections and they're like, you know what, let's, we got to do this and this and that. Having all the corrections in there and having it be Alexandrian messed up nonsense as it is, maybe the idea that I had doesn't make quite as much sense as it might if this wasn't, if this was a draft and that it was supposed to be corrected a whole bunch. I don't know. It depends. It's theories, it's ideas. We'll have to see. But I think that that's an important point to think about. Why would it have so many corrections given the quality of the calligraphy? It's almost as if it was done that way on purpose and then somebody came back in and corrected it later on because they were upset about it or something, which is probably more what they're trying to imply. They wrote quickly. They did it quickly because they were trying to make money. Oh, okay, got it. They weren't careful. They didn't care. Got it. I don't think that should have been the case in this point. Anyways.
Be explained in this way.
More can be said about that, maybe at some point.
In the world.
So right there, notice the conclusion that the BBC is giving. They're saying that if this oldest Bible, supposedly, had all of these mistakes and variants in it, well, then that proves it cannot be the immutable, inerrant Word of God. Hence confirming what the Jesuits and the Vatican and all the Catholic scholars and the higher critics have been arguing for hundreds of years.
Yep.
Attempts to destroy the Protestant doctrine of sola scriptura.
Now that's a huge thing. I don't know if you guys get the significance out of that or not, but the Roman Catholic domination of the world was lost when the Protestant Reformation came through, and they were just like, nope, the Bible is God's word. If the Bible's not God's word, then we can get put back in the Dark Ages very quickly. And that's where we are today.
The same BBC doc. In response, Simonides
into what found a copy in Greek. But in Western Europe, it was only known in Latin.
The reason 1855 was never continually affirmed. I have proof and place it with, or it
The earliest complete testament.
So this is what drove the matter was. Black on
my. The same BBC documentary even goes on to show how the influence of Codex Sinaiticus would specifically undermine the Protestant faith in the King James Bible.
That depends. That depends on a lot.
von Tischendorf to go and search across the ancient scriptoria, as they were called.
When the manuscript was first discovered in 1844, this met exactly what Tischendorf was looking for. In other words, a very early manuscript of the Christian Bible, and in particular, of course, what he subsequently found was the earliest complete New Testament.
But is Codex Sinaiticus really the earliest copy of the New Testament? Or is it a 19th century work created by Constantine Simonides? A work that was somehow tampered with and manipulated to fulfill a centuries-old agenda.
Have no idea. That totally couldn't happen. Let's see. Now, I think that would make more sense for Sinaiticus to be older than Vaticanus because of all the corrections. That's probably why. Because they figure, all the corrections would have been something that was earlier, and the more divergent the text, the more original and neutral it must have been. Not so heavily doctrinal. All this nonsense about Christianity and stuff like that. Christianity was started out more Gnostic, correct? And then that would kind of make things a little bit less doctrinal. And then crazy stuff crept in, and then you have the Catholic Church and stuff, and that's exactly what the Satanists teach the history of the Bible as. That's what Bill Schneblin was taught as a Satanist. That exact history. And I highly recommend that you guys check out that video by Phil Stringer on the cults versus the King James Bible. And you find out exactly what the spirits from the other side have to say about that book you have on your shelf, Sturdy and Black.
After presenting many names, dates, and places to the scholars of Western Europe, Simonides himself seemed to grow weary of the debates. At one point he wrote, "What then have you to oppose to the evidence of living men, O zealous defender of the pseudo-Sinaitic Codex? If you are still incredulous, I say to you, remain faithful in your faithlessness. I have proclaimed the truth, for I will answer as I should to the all-seeing God in the day of judgment.
Very orthodox.
I have spoken. I have no sin. Wholly yours, Constantine Simonides."
I had somebody tell me that earlier today.
Final work in 1864, before leaving England for good. In it, he reaffirmed his claims about Sinaiticus and included the testimonies of those who believed him. Yet his enemies in the press continued to insist that he was merely a liar and a forger. The charge of forgery was never proven against Simonides, but can be traced to his initial conflict with Tischendorf at the University of Leipzig in 1855, when Simonides presented the first known copy of the Shepherd of Hermas in Greek. The reason the Shepherd of Hermas is important is because it's a work that was embraced by the early church, but in Western Europe, it was only known in Latin, and yet scholars knew that it had originally been written in Greek, but nobody ever found a copy in Greek. Constantine Simonides was the first man to bring a Greek copy of the Shepherd of Hermas into Western Europe. And that's very important because the Shepherd of Hermas is also found as part of Codex Sinaiticus. And this supports the idea that he could have created Codex Sinaiticus. Why? Because he had access to a Greek copy of the Shepherd of Hermas. And he's the only person in the world who had a copy of the Greek version of the Shepherd of Hermas. That's why it's so significant. While most of the scholars at Leipzig embraced the Hermas manuscript as genuine, Tischendorf declared it to be a forgery because it disagreed with the Latin version.
This gets interesting.
In response, Simonides argued that the manuscript Hermas was correct, and that the common Latin translations from which it differed had been made, not in accordance with the Greek originals, but to suit the views
of the Latin translators.
For nearly 2,000 years, the world has been turned.
I love technology.
Over what
It hates me.
Called the most controversial book of all time. What the critics wanted to believe. The critics wanted to believe of Simonides, A.D. for the King James Bible, for leaving England for good. In it, he reaffirmed his claims about Sinaiticus.
Ay, ay, ay.
Really attacked by an exposure of the fraud in Simonic, eminently kept the Greek originals, but to suit the views of the Latin translators, who had put into the mouth
Oh my goodness.
had himself come from.
Vatican closet.
Again. Other committee members include Mild, Ex Vaticanus, Revision.
Okay, so it doesn't like that area. Crummy technology, guys.
Written, drunken with the blood of the saint, but the Roman Church, martyrs of Jesus, saw those. Claim that he found them because he gnawed in it. Well, then that proves it cannot be the immutable inerrancy for that it had originally. Maimonides gained much ill will among the members. Were severe later. Myth, a friend of Trajan, that it had originally been written in Greek, but nobody ever found. Script Hermas was correct, and that the common Latin translations from which it differed had been made, not in accordance with the Greek, related to strengthen the position of the Catholic Church, to which the translator
can't get it past that spot.
Anglo named Bia, with the Latin verb of the shepherd. And this supports the idea.
See if we can get it to just skip that spot.
Latin Church were severely attacked by an exposure of the fraud in the Latin translations. Simonides gained much ill will among the members of that church.
This cannot be right. This is a forgery.
Oh, the cropping.
Forgery would be exaggerated in the English press to the point that Simonides would eventually be accused of forging nearly everything he came in contact with.
This is a forgery.
I don't like that yucky brown line that's creeping up the slider there. Don't like it at all.
About 18.
Come on. 2:45 in the morning is not the time to be doing this, you piece of junk.
Forgery would be exaggerated in the English press to the point.
I'm surprised anybody is watching this at this point. Yeah, I'm taking all this nonsense out. This is absolutely ridiculous.
This would eventually be about 1864. He came in contact.
Nope, it hates that spot. Absolutely hates it. Will not have it.
Of forging nearly everything he came in contact with. first, and then to the Gentiles. They preach that first, and then to the Gentiles.
Yeah.
They preach.
I'm sorry that today's been such a failure, guys. It's really discouraging for me too. Don't worry about it. We're fighting a lot of things with technology. We're fighting a conspiracy that at least I believe is out there. There's a lot that's going on. Weekly progress in our technology is not an easy thing. We have not gotten to this point easily, guys, and it's going to be a fight the whole way. I really should have downloaded this video earlier so I would have had a fresh copy of it.
They were.
Yeah, I don't like how the bar goes yellow like that. That's gross.
In response, Simonides argued that the manuscript Hermas was correct, and that the common Latin translations from which it differed had been made, not in accordance with the Greek originals, but to suit the views of the Latin translators, who had put into the mouth their standard.
Now, the Greek Orthodox and the Orthodox churches in general are very resentful of the Catholic Church, very resentful. We've got a lot of Russian Orthodoxes here in our area. Let me get this window up. There we go.
He is said to have left England about 1864. And the Vatican copy.
This is a fight, guys. This is a fight.
Court seems to have been motivated by a hatred for the traditional Greek of the.
Now, is this part of the not section anymore? Not part of the Sinaiticus section anymore? Because that's where I want to stop, is at the end of the Sinaiticus section. It won't go past that, guys.
Library published their website.
Here, I can't share the video, but here, let me do this. I can share the audio with you guys. We'll go through the rest of it this way. Pull it up on my phone. Dismiss. We'll zip through it. We'll be all done. Let's see now. We're going to go to... I'm going to go to my website because that's right where I know the same video is. And we're going to go to Alephgate, which is right here. And we're going to go to Tares Among the Wheat, which is not that one. That's the wrong video. I keep putting Bridge to Babylon up, and it's the wrong one. So I've got to go down to the Bible part of this thing. Untold Bible Story. Alrighty, this should be better. We can finish this up, get people in bed. This has been a crazy nuts evening is what it's been. Absolutely crazy nuts.
They used as their foundation Codex Vaticanus and the Codex Sinaiticus.
It was an entirely new Greek text,
Eminently calculated to strengthen the position of the Catholic Church, to which the translator, among the members of the fraud in the Latin translations, Simonides gained much ill will among the members of that church.
This cannot be right. This is a forgery.
The charge of forgery would be exaggerated in the English press to the point that Simonides would eventually be accused of forging nearly everything he came in contact with. He is said to have left England about 1864. But then, in 1870, a number of the men who opposed him would become involved in the new revision committee for the King James Bible. The committee was led by Fenton John Anthony Hort, the friend of Trigellus, who was among the first to embrace the Codex Sinaiticus. Under his leadership, the committee would create a new Greek text in fulfillment of what Tischendorf had written in 1866. They used as their foundation Codex Vaticanus and the Codex Sinaiticus.
It was an entirely new Greek text that is different to anything that existed before.
Hort seems to have been motivated by a hatred for the traditional Greek of the Reformation. He referred to it as villainous and as that vile Textus Receptus. His partner was an Anglican bishop named B.F. Westcott. Other committee members included Trigellus along with F.H.A. Scribner. It is interesting to note that the committee also invited John Henry Newman, who was at the time a Catholic priest. And while he declined the offer, their invitation reveals much about the theological opinions of Westcott and Hort.
You know, there's definite links to Roman Catholicism there in the different Bibles. You know, Westcott and Hort, there were definitely Anglo-Catholics at best.
So you would call Westcott and Hort Anglo-Catholics?
Yeah, I would think that you would have to class them as that. You have your whole Tractarian movement going on at that time in the Anglican Church. And that was the Anglo-Catholic movement by John Henry Newman, who later became a cardinal in the Roman Catholic Church. But he was in the Anglican Church at that time, and John Keble and Stroud and many of the other writers, they were all working to make Anglicanism Roman Catholic. They wanted to introduce many Roman Catholic practices into Anglican, and about 200 Anglicans converted to Roman Catholicism at that time, and thousands of members. So now there are
operation with
there. Well, I think that probably sums up the whole thing. I don't think that they get back into the Simonides stuff after that point. Let me see if I can bring back. Oh, let me see if I can bring back my video real quick. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, we'll just drop it here. More than enough information for one night, more than enough time spent. Yeah. It's real, guys. There's something going on. There wouldn't be all this nonsense going on if there wasn't. It's not all just a bunch of half-baked conspiracy stuff. We've seen this. It's been crazy. It's been fascinating. I've enjoyed it. I hope you have too. Glad that you guys enjoyed it. If you guys want to see a revisiting of this topic, me reading through my notes, possibly. I do plan to do more Sinaitic stuff. Let me check the basic layout that I have for the next live streams. Let's see. We did the Jesuit conspiracy We did the one on the Lord's Prayer. That's my Simonides affair was today. Versus White debate is the next week or two. I'm not sure if we'll do that because a lot of that has been covered tonight. And that could probably just be its own video. But anyways, yes. This one, I might end up breaking this one into 2 parts and republishing it outside of my designation. Just make it a regular uploaded video. We shall see. I appreciate you guys sticking around. There's 2 of you still alive here with me tonight. I appreciate that. That is fantastic. It's amazing you guys are dedicated YouTube connoisseur warriors. Thank you very much. Anybody who has stuck around to the end of this video, I appreciate it. Humbled. I can't believe that I've made it this far with this technology. It's been an absolute war this entire time. That's what happens every time you try to stretch into a new area. StreamYard hopefully will be yeah. Have a fantastic night. Pray, pray, pray. Pray for our channel. Like it if you liked it. Hate it if you hated it. Any comments are appreciated. And be truly as a Bible version conspiracy. God bless.